Thursday, you'll see President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address right here. He'll be speaking on Thursday evening. But should we have a great expectations? Should we feel, in fact, that it is indeed the worst of times and we have no right, I suppose, to expect any major announcements at all? Well, Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu, the director at the School of Public Leadership at the University of Stellenbosch, also joined this afternoon by senior political reporter Ziyanda and Ngcobo. Professor Ziyanda, good afternoon to you. Professor, if I may just start with you. When we look at last year's State of the Nation address, is it possible to really assess what promises were implemented, which promises were actually kept, and which weren't?
Thank you very much, Stephen, and good afternoon to you and your listeners. Yes, it is possible to assess what was done and what was not done. We would know that the government operated under COVID-19, or the country as a whole. Other than that, the president gave us 4 points that we had to look at, and the issue of economic recovery, unemployment, dealing with corruption. And in most cases, most of those have not. We're still battling with the same problems. I think little has been done, and it can be attributed to a number of issues, but the fact that little has been done.
I mean, Ziyanda, I think there's a sense of frustration. I mean, at one point the president promised us bullet trains, and since then the railways have been stolen.
Yeah.
You know, certainly in the cities. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it?
That is the problem, Stephen, and I think over the years, if you look at the first State of the Nation address that was delivered by President Cyril Ramaphosa when he was still caretaker president after the rather abrupt exit of former President Jacob Zuma, he's had to taper down every single year, you know, the expectations and the dreams, so to speak, that he has. It was bullet trains, smart cities, you know, infrastructure development, big plans, you know, the Youth Employment Summit, which did happen, and several other promises which were made. But if you look at our current state of the economy, this time around, we're coming out of a year where we've seen unprecedented unrest. We've seen Parliament on fire. We've seen the Waterkloof Air Force Base on fire. We've actually, the city press reports is accurate, that there was an intruder at Musanda, which is the headquarters of the State Security Agency. So there are critical issues that the president needs to address. And there is a sense from some that he actually just needs to go back to the basics. You know, whether it's talking about actually financing the National Prosecuting Authority more as a result of the release of those two volumes of the state capture reports, the third which he said he delivered to Parliament in June, or whether you're actually dealing practically then with the rampant corruption at all spheres of the government. Where's the progress on that? Because that is the ticket that President Cyril Ramaphosa actually entered into the presidency with.
Professor Ndevu, I mean, it's tempting to say to the president, and perhaps I'm too cynical when I do this, to simply say, don't make any more promises, just do what you told us you would do last time, you know, but actually do them. You know, make a promise basically to keep it simple. I mean, am I wrong to suggest that?
I think what we want to see from President Ramaphosa, previously we have thought that he is trying to grapple with how government works as a person who has been from business and now adapting to the new ways of doing things in government. But it is clear over time that South Africans are impatient and South Africans are struggling more and more. And it is no time for President Ramaphosa to give us grand plans, but to tell us about implementation programs that he would have. Issues of unemployment, a growing number of people that are unemployed in the country talks to a situation that is really there. The issue of poverty that has increased as well. So I don't think President Ramaphosa has an opportunity to really dream. It is rather an opportune time to start talking about the implementation plans and also put timelines, concrete timelines around dealing with issues of corruption, concrete timelines around the recovery of the economy. What are we going to do with the load sheddings that are recurring again, and so forth and so forth. So it is time for President Ramaphosa to take the country into his confidence around what government will be doing to deal with some of these issues.
I mean, Professor, I mean, it's interesting, and I mean, I'm a journalist, so my job is actually to be rude to politicians, and I'm very lucky to have the job that I do. But Isn't it also true that South Africa is a very hard country to govern? And let me give an example that I think illustrates this quite nicely. We have fallen incredibly far behind when it comes to the provision of mobile internet, right? Broadband costs are expensive, more expensive than they should be. The last time we released spectrum, I think it was 2006, 2007. There are people who finished school and have an undergraduate degree since we last released spectrum, right? That's how long this has taken. Now, the reason that the President rightly has said he wants to do this, the reason he hasn't isn't because someone stole something or because there was bad implementation. It's because under our system, people who are aggrieved can go to court. And so they've managed to stop it and, for the moment. And doesn't that also just prove how difficult our country is to govern? There are a lot of role players. We have a democratic system. We have a court system. And that actually does mean, and with our inequality, that actually does mean that our society is hard to govern.
I actually think the contrary. Our society, it is easy to govern because you can make promises and don't deliver on them, and there are minimal, if any, consequences for that. In a country where it was difficult to govern, we would have seen street protests swelling our streets. We would have seen probably government being unstable or being overthrown. So our people are very patient, and I think that's the advantage that the government is doing. But we are seeing over and over again, they are abusing the kindness of our people. The institutions that are there, the legal institutions, are there to ensure that laws of a country are implemented in line with our constitution. And government has a responsibility to ensure that they create an environment that is suitable for them to be able to implement programs. And if they don't do that, people are going to challenge programs and activities that government undertakes that are against the law. So it is their right to actually go to the court, but government has a responsibility to ensure that programs that they bring in place are programs that talks to what is expected of them. So I do think that our people are very kind to our government and very patient.
It's a very interesting choice of words that you've used, Professor. Ziyanda, it's interesting because in the past, we've always looked at the State of the Nation address through the lens of the balance of power within the ANC. And we've done that because the ANC has had such a commanding majority since 1994.
That's right.
Well, that's not the case anymore.
Yep.
I mean, it is, but it isn't. And everyone's talking about what's going to happen in 2024. Just 2 years from now. Which would mean, grade 1 and grade 2, so if we do a school calendar. So my point is, does Ramaphosa now need to concentrate on the ANC? It's an ANC election year. Or does he need to actually concentrate on winning votes for the ANC in the country?
So there's an argument, Stephen, that the president has always prioritized the ANC over the priorities of the country. And that's part of the reason why we find ourselves in the quagmire that we find ourselves in. The other part, Stephen, as you've rightfully mentioned, it is an elective conference here, and politics within the ANC has continuously degenerated to such levels of chaos that it would not be scandalous of me to say that this could be President Cyril Ramaphosa's last State of the Nation address.
Sure.
Anything is possible within the ANC in its current state and form. And it's very critical also to reflect then on the report that was released yesterday by that high-level panel led by Professor Sandy Afrika to say that it's actually the internal factional battles within the ANC that are threatening sustainability of the state. That's not a statement that should be taken lightly, given how, even if you look at how, the government's response to that July unrest in parts of KZN and Gauteng, the way in which it was managed, this is affecting all aspects then of government and cabinet in particular, especially when you look at that economic recovery plan. It's the same old problem, Stephen, that I'm sure you've been speaking about before my time in journalism, that the ANC is good at diagnosing problems, it's good at putting policies together, but just implement, and I remember quite distinctly, the president had said that he would use his 2020 and 2021 State of the Nation addresses to now outline plans. Those plans have been outlined. What is the status update? Why was the high-level review panel reports by Dr. Sidney Mufamadi, which was done in 2018, not implemented? If we're just looking at security apparatus, we could go to education, Stephen. We could talk about the health care system and our response to COVID-19, something that couldn't have been predicted but then exposed the inadequacies of our state. So this State of the Nation address, I think, as Professor Ndevu has already said, we know our problem. problems. But what are you going to do about the politics within your party to ensure that it doesn't affect the ability of the state to execute its duties? Interestingly, those local government elections then gave that window to say perhaps South Africans are ready now for a change, because as he's rightfully mentioned, or to use his words, you know, South Africans have been kind and patient. How much more patience do South Africans still have in them?
Professor, it's interesting that, because, I mean, people are running out of patience for the ANC, I think. I mean, it was President Ramaphosa who said there was a palpable sense of anger at the ANC. He said it in an NEC address. In a way, there are going to be some people who are going to say there's a small window here for Ramaphosa to almost ignore the party and do what's right for the country and then trade off his own personal popularity. I think maybe 2 years ago people would have had optimism that he'll do something dramatic. I don't sense any optimism, I'm afraid, ahead of the State of the Nation address.
I think one of the challenges that is facing President Ramaphosa is distinguishing between the party and government and ensuring that government programs are not derailed because of party aspirations. And that has been his challenge since he took over office. What I'm expecting from him this year is to say that government would implement programs of government, and he would create space for party political issues to be dealt with separately from government programs, because it is clear in terms of legislation, the separation between the two. But the implementation is a bit of a challenge. Like you, I know that in the past that has not happened. I am skeptical about whether the president would do that, but it is in his own good that he does that, to say to people that I am still the president that is in charge of the country. I know that the center doesn't hold in my ruling party, but at least in government the center holds, and government wants to develop programs that would help our people. So I am hoping this is his last chance, as I indicated earlier on, and it is up to him whether he takes it or not.
There's one last big thing that he could announce, of course, which is a basic income grant, which is, you know, it's the governing party under pressure. If we look at the brutal politics of the maths here, there are huge calls for it. There's a crying need for it. There's a strong body of economists who say we can't afford it. Do you think he's going to do it?
I think there's certainly a need for a system that would cushion ordinary people and the poorest of the poor. But I'm not sure whether the social grant, the basic income grant, is the only option or is the solution to that problem. I think if we look at the cost, as you have indicated, it really doesn't tally up. It shows that the country cannot afford it. As an expediency program, you can implement that, but there are consequences later on. So I do think that creating jobs, ensuring that you create sustainable jobs, development of infrastructure would be a good alternative to that. But I think as a politicking ticket, President might announce that as something that they are considering, but I don't know whether they will implement it.
Ziyanda, we saw yesterday the release of the report. You talk about the release of the report. I mean, are we going to get a big announcement of, you know, some sort of, please tell me not a review, some sort of change to the State Security Agency? If the man says I'm shocked, I think I'm going to scream. But we're going to get all three of us in trouble, and the Prof not even in the studio with us. But do you think that we're going to have a situation where he's going to announce some sort of major change? And maybe even the suspension of the National Police Commission, for example?
I'm not holding my breath, personally.
I wouldn't.
I'm a cynic when it comes to that. I mean, we've seen in that report, which outlines how the National Security Council was not operating and meeting as regularly as it should have in light of or ahead of that July unrest. They'd gotten several warnings from the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee that 2021 would be a volatile year. These issues were ignored. Yes, now we have Mondli Kongubele, who is now the State Security Minister in essence. But what does that actually mean when you have a prosecutorial arm that is severely undercapacitated and underfunded? Perhaps that would be, you know, the most apt announcement to be making tomorrow, Stephen. We are still waiting for the third volume of that state capture report, and then it will be presented before Parliament. Still going to become a political football, but not not much is really still going to be done, Stephen. So I'm not expecting any big or dramatic moves. If you've looked at how the president has moved over the years, and as I've said, he's had to sort of taper down the expectations. So much has happened just in the last year. You and I had an off-air debate about the monies that we've gotten from the IMF and the World Bank. I don't know if those bullet trains will be funded by that, but we just simply don't have the money, Stephen. That is the long and short of the country's problems. And unless there is some sort of real management of the executive on the part of the president and actually things being done. Remember, there was even the issue of performance agreements for the ministers. Nobody knows what's happened to that. Nobody knows what's happened to the money that was raised for that GBV summit. We're still having, support centers severely underfunded. These are real crises that hog our headlines day in and day out. So the optimism that you're speaking about, I also agree. I'm not quite picking it up right now.
I hope all three of us are wrong, and I don't say that lightly. Yeah. Professor, what we've spoken about, the sense of despair, the frustration, I think the hunger that stalks our land, the sense of cynicism. I mean, here we are on Rolling News Channel, Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405, all three of us almost trying not to be too cynical, because that's where we are. The president must know all this, right? He must know that this is how the country feels.
Stephen, I'm sometimes wondering where the president lives, because we live around poverty, inequality, challenges of unemployment in the country, all of us. And he must be experiencing these. And I'm not sure whether he indeed experiences some of these, or he sees some of these and how he feels around them. I think we must appeal to his conscience to say, President Ramaphosa, enough is enough. Government needs to take action. Government needs to arrest the situation before we have further unrest, such as the ones that we had in June last year. Before we have lawlessness, we need to ensure that we appoint competent people in government to ensure that government programs are implemented effectively and efficiently. We need to strengthen our institutions. With many reports that are coming out, it is very clear that our institutions are very weak, our public institutions, and we need to strengthen them. I did not need to report the high panel report to know that the challenges that we experienced in June last year were because of dysfunctional security cluster. It was clear for everyone to see. I'm not sure where the president lives.
Professor Ndevu, Zwelinzima and Ndevu, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed. At the University of Stellenbosch, our senior political reporter Ziyanda, thank you very much indeed.